Hi, this is Marcus, and welcome to this week's video. We're going to be discussing Capture One. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to process your RAW files to maintain that filmic look. And I'm going to be showing you some really cool things about Capture One, and also I'm going to be showing you some of the shortcomings of Capture One. There's a couple of things that we're going to be going over as far as processing your photos. There are some things that Capture One cannot do. Capture One is not a replacement for Photoshop, and it doesn't pretend to be Photoshop. There are some edits that you have to take to Photoshop or Affinity Photo or Pixelmator Pro, and that's just the way it is. But for the most part, we're going to use Capture One to really dig in and utilize the great features of Capture One. I am certified in Capture One. I've been using Capture One for over 8 years. I've been using Lightroom since the inception of Lightroom. I've been using Pixelmator Pro ever since it came out. I've used basically every RAW editor that has hit the market. And I'm very well versed in all of the applications, and I have all of those applications. And I'll go into some detail of why I have them all. I'm going to be recommending that you invest just as much money as you possibly can in your digital darkroom as you do with your camera gear. There's a breakdown that I have of how much you're going to get as far as what's going to create a great looking photo. 20% from the camera, 30% from the lens, 50% from post-processing. I've been doing photo manipulation or photo editing since 1994. I've been doing professional photography since 2006. And I have used every major camera system on the market with the exception of Hasselblad and Nikon as far as in the professional setting. Everything else I've used. So this will not be a segment on telling you which camera you should use. I'm going to tell you the cameras that I use. Currently right now, I'm using the Lumix S1R, the S1R2, and the S5 Mark II. Those are my running gun full frame camera systems. And in the studio, 99% of the time I'm using medium format, or larger than full frame, whatever terminology you want to use for the Fuji cameras. I have the GFX 100S Mark II and the GFX 50S Mark II. And we're going to go over a couple of things, and I'm going to show you some real cool things while using Capture One with it. Why do I use Capture One 99% of the time when I'm in the studio? There is no RAW editor on the market that can match Capture One as far as tethering. When it comes to tethering, Capture One has just cornered that market and they've taken it over. And it's really good in color grading as well. This is not to say that Lightroom is not good. Lightroom is a very good application as well, but they each have their strengths and they each have their weaknesses. One thing that both applications has that is one of their weaknesses is that they do not have a lot of lens profiles. They do not have a lot of calibrated lens profiles for a lot of different lenses. And I'm going to be talking about that in depth, but I'm going to just address it right now. If it doesn't have a lens profile for the camera and the lens that you're using, it will default to a manufacturer profile. And what that's stating is that the corrections for that lens is supposed to be contained within the RAW file. There is some processing, there is some information that's in that profile from the manufacturer, but it is not equal and not on the same level as a calibrated lens profile. That's one of the reasons why I'm going to be also showing you something in this video for Capture One and how to use an application by DxO called PureRAW. I decided to buy PureRAW and to keep that. And you can even use that to be your main application to process your RAW files. Why? Because DxO PureRAW has 115,000 calibrated lens modules, far more than Capture One and Lightroom put together. Lightroom's going to have more than Capture One. Capture One has the least. Now, if you're shooting with a phase one camera, you're set, because Capture One was developed to be able to process phase one RAW photos, pretty much similar to what Focus was created for the Hasselblad cameras. And when you're going to other cameras, They do a good job depending on certain type of cameras or the lenses that they have. But just to give you an idea, they don't have a lens profile for the Sigma 50mm f1.2, the brand new art lens. They don't have a lens profile for the 24-70 f2.8, the art lens, the Mark II. They do not have a lens profile for that. And so that is one of the reasons why I lean heavily on DxO PureRAW. So we're going to get started. I'm going to show you some real cool things. And I'm going to note, like I said, I'm going to note the things that I think Capture One is really strong at. And I'm going to also note those things that I think that, maybe in future updates that they can correct some things. But all in all, Capture One is a solid application, really, really good. And I think that you're going to be pleased with this tutorial. Hi, this is Marcus. Welcome to the tutorial of Capture One. Now, this is not going to be an in-depth tutorial over every facet or every feature of Capture One. What I'm going to do is highlight some of the things of how I use Capture One, some of the things of where it's really strong at, and I will note those things that there needs to be some improvement of. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff, and we're going to go here and do a live update. Let's say, for instance, we are in here, we go into here, now we're getting ready to start doing our editing. The photo has been brought in. You can see here, this has a manufacturer profile. It does not have a lens profile for the 24-70. The only thing you can do is fix distortion. That's all you can do. You're not going to be able to give sharpening. But Capture One brings this photo in pre-sharpened at 180. So when you go in tight to this, if you look at this photo, it has been pre-sharpened. But what you can do is you can actually, if you don't want Capture One to do any sharpening or any pre-processing at all, and that's something that I'm a fan of, you can actually go into here, click this and say, I can bring this down like this. Take everything to 0. And I can go in here and say, I want to save this as a default, but it will only save it as a default for the particular camera that you're using. So if I do this, it'll save it for the default. Whenever I'm using the Panasonic S1 R2, these will not come in sharpened. And the photo does not look like it's unsharpened. But the issue that you actually have is that it is not that razor sharpening. And this is how you can maintain your filmic look. Because most people are not aware when you let this come in. So if we go back and we put this back to the defaults, just keep in mind, if there is a lens profile, now here there's no lens profile, so it's only getting sharpened once. And if I was going to use this exactly like it is, I would go ahead and let this, do the contrast type of sharpening that it's going to be doing. And it is not as good as optical. But if I had a lens profile and I had the sharpening for the optical of this, if you don't pay attention to this, you're sharpening the photo twice. And this is why you get this digital, this extra clinical type of photo. And then you'll spend all your time using some third-party product or Photoshop trying to give it a filmic look. And you can do this with the raw file. This one has the same problem. This has been pre-sharpened, but when we go to this right here, go back to shape, there is no sharpening for this. Now, what we're going to do with this photo is I'm going to send this off to DxO PureRAW. What it's going to do is do all of my optical and all of my denoising that I want it to be done, because it's going to bring it in as an import. What I will do is I will import that back into this library called, or not library, but this photo album called Live Edits. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this really quickly here. So now what I'm going to do is right click here and I'm going to say open with. Make sure you don't do edit with. If you edit with it, it's going to convert it to a pixel or RGB file to be edited. I want to have this open. Now DxO PureRAW is not going to show because it doesn't have a plugin module directly for this, but you can use it. I'm going to say open. It's going to take me to my applications. I'm going to go ahead and type in DxO. And it will find it, and we're going to go DxO PureRAW, and I'm going to open this. and it's going to take it into the application, and I'm going to process this and get everything I need to process this photo with, and then bring it back in. And then we'll go from there. So now we have this. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to process with a preview, right? And so now you can see all of those corrections that I'm able to do, and look how I fixed the vignetting. You see how I fixed that vignetting? That if I'm inside of Capture One and I just go with this, I don't get that, I don't get those optical corrections. And that's why it's very important. So this application will cost you an additional cost for it. The good thing about it is that it's not a subscription, but I think that if you're serious about making sure that your photos look the best that they can possibly look, when Capture One has a calibrated lens profile, go for it. You're not going to have an issue. But if it doesn't have one, this one is what you would actually use. And so I'm going to show you some cool features in this one. So I'm going to be using the DeepPRIME XD3, which used to be for the Fuji cameras, but now it works for all sensors. Now, for all intents and purposes, I don't have any noise where there's dead pixels or hot pixels in there. I'm not going to go with the absolute best. We're going to just go with DeepPRIME 3. DeepPRIME 3 for 80% of the things that you want to be able to correct will take care of that. You can create custom settings, and you can save your own custom settings. It remembers the last settings that you actually used. So what I'm doing right here is you can see that it's doing lens optimization. So when I go in here at 100%, and I'm going to just pull this, you'll see what it does. I can go in here now. If I want this to maintain a little bit of softer, it'll give me the optimization of that lens sharpening to 75, but I can over sharpen it by going hard. And when I go hard, look at how it brings it in. You see how that looks real digital and real harsh? But it is using the corrections based upon a calibrated lens profile. It's just, kind of like oversampling, if that's the word that I want to use for that. So typically, I will keep this at the standard of 100. And you'll see that goes back down. That's going to give me my sharpening. I've got my vignetting and my lens distortion. You can choose how you want your lens distortion to be done, whether you want it to be at the image crop to the original ratio or in a certain area. If you've cropped a photo, you may only want it to be applied to the area where you have cropped. I'm going to go with maximum rectangular. If you have any dust that's on your sensor, this will remove the dust as well. I just leave that checked. You don't have to, you can take it off, but I leave it checked because sometimes you may not see it and it may be there. So let me just go ahead and take this back out. If we go in here, and I'm just going to show this, we're just going to look at the thing. If I turn vignetting off, you'll see the photo gets darker, and this fixes all the chromatic aberration, and that fixes the lens distortion. So when I put that back on and turn these things on, this doesn't do anything to beauty up your photos. Then we can go to the next thing, and this will allow me to add a layer mask on top of here and do some more local adjustments using those parameters that's based upon the calibrated lens module. So I can go in here and hit 100, and if I wanted the hair to have a little bit more sharpening, all I'd have to do is just go ahead and highlight it like this, just paint it on there. Just paint the areas that I would want to have that. That's kind of in silhouette. And I could go in here and say, I want to either intensify it or soften it up if I wanted to do that. Now, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to take that off because there's no need to do that. I can remove areas and put that on there, but it lets me do local adjustments if I needed to do that. Then we go back into here, and I'm going to convert this to a DNG high fidelity compressed file, which is going to save me some space. I would rather compress the raw file after the fact than do it in camera. If you do it in camera, some people say they don't see any difference or they don't see any loss in quality. I do. I would rather have that information and then do it with a software application like this, because if I have an issue where I don't think that it gives me what I need, I can always say uncompress. But if I shoot it in camera and it comes in, I'm just stuck with the results. So I always do it at the software level and not in camera. Well, we're going to go with this because I've been testing this for over a couple months and I have not had an issue. I can also do an output for a TIFF. Now, if I do output for TIFF, I always go 16-bit. I never go 8-bit, and I never use compression. I can also go into this feature here that's called DxO Smart Lighting, which is part of DxO Photo Lab. And if I click this, what this will do is go in there, and as I bring this intensity up, you'll see that it'll go ahead and it'll do some updating of the dynamic range and the highlights and then the shadows. It'll go ahead and correct that. I can do it as a smart object and take it directly into Photoshop. And when you select these parameters, you can actually go ahead and change the ICC profile as well. So what I'm going to do is turn the TIFF off. I want this to go into the original folder of where it's actually contained. So I say put it back into the original folder. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to tell it to, I want you to open Capture One. Now these are applications that I actually put in there. A lot of these applications don't show. You'd have to go and say, select the software. And when you select the software, it remembers. So we're going to go into Capture One. I'm not going to export this with the original RAW file. I'm going to leave the original RAW file where it is. But what this is going to do when I process this is that once it processes this, it's going to then do an import into Capture One and bring it back into the photo. And then I have those things, they'll be corrected. You can say, view the results. I know the results are there. And when I go in here, Capture One is telling me that it's importing it. You can see that this is a DING file. Then I'm going to import it. Now when it imports it, I'm going to go back to library. It's going to show that this photo has been imported. When I click on this photo, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say I want to add it to the selective library. When I do that, now I can go back down to the live where I was prior. And now we got 4 photos. And in there, we have the original photo, and this is the one I just did, right? And you can see the difference in the things that I've actually corrected. Capture One is still sharpening this. So we're just going to pull this down because we don't need to use this at all. I'm going to use the sharpening that came with the optical, which is really good. It's still maintaining my filmic quality, and I'm good to go with that. You can see that it didn't bring any noise reduction. It did respect that, right? Because it didn't bring anything in for noise reduction parameters. I'm just going to pull that down, but it didn't recognize the sharpening for that. So now that we're going to be starting with this, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and do the edit for this. So we'll go back in here. I don't need to do anything for this. You can see this profile now is generic. It doesn't have a manufacturer profile. We're going to go in here. I'm going to do this a couple of different ways. Now, all I got to worry about doing is just doing my edit. I don't have to worry about doing anything in particular to actually correct the parameters of the lens. So we're going to choose the background. And I'm going to hit my mask. Now, there has been too much that has been chosen. I can do this a couple ways. I can go into here and I'm going to remove those things that I don't think that needs to be on that. And that grass is not going to be part of that as well. All I want to be able to do is really get that sky, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take this and we're just going to remove those areas off of here. So when I dim the background, it doesn't dim the other stuff. The rest of this can go, and then I'm going to right click on here and go refine. Now that's going to cause this to actually feather into the hair, but there are some spaces that was not selected. I'm going to drag it. It's going to get on the skin and everything else, but it's going to do a very good job. And I'm satisfied with that. So we're going to go ahead and hit apply. And I'm going to take the mask off and I'm going to bring down the highlight. Now the way I edit, some people go with the exposure right away. And I would encourage you not to do that. Because when you look at the histogram, there are some parts of the photo that are perfect. There are some issues in the extreme shadows. And you may have some issues in the highlights. So what you want to do is identify those areas that's got a problem and correct those. If I go down to the main layer, and if I bring up the exposure, it brings it all up. Okay, now I got this, but now I gotta go into here to correct the highlight that it brought up, because it brings everything up and it destroys your midtones. So here, I want to bring down some highlights. That's going to bring me more of that sky back, right? And then I'm going to give it some clarity, which is going to sharpen up the midtones in that area. And I'm going to go ahead and do some structure, right? Now, I'm going to pull the structure back by -15. That's going to still maintain my filmic and the type of quality. I will go back in here and we can see nothing is really being over sharpened, and that's fine. And so the next thing we're going to do here is I'm going to go into the Dehaze. I'm going to let it do the auto and choose the tone. And I'm going to go in here and you can see I'm bringing back some of that sky that you normally don't see, which I'm probably going to replace the sky inside of Photoshop, but that's fine. So we can do that. And so now that I've done that, we're going to go back to the main layer. And in the main layer, what I want to do is, I know that when I go in here, the black is kind of a problem. So I'm just going to bring up the black area. And now we can see more of that hair in there. Now I didn't destroy the highlights or the midtones or anything. I just brought the black area up. So just identify those areas that have a problem. I'm going to bring down the highlights again over this because this is doing the entire image. Sometimes you have to, when you look at the histogram, trust your eyes over the histogram. The histogram may be saying everything is perfect, but if it don't look right to your eyes, trust your eyes. And I'm going to bring some shadows up to about right here. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to lift the brightness, which is the midtones, right? Now that I've done that, I got this photo that I'm pleased with. And I'm going to go into the RGB levels. And remember, you're dealing with RGB. So if I lighten an area, it also lightens the color because this is on RGB. The only time you don't do that is when you're on Luma. If I go to Luma, that's just doing luminosity, and pull this down, it makes the lightness go down, but it doesn't change the color. So you don't see the colors being affected. But when you're on RGB and I do that, well, now the colors get affected, right? So you have to be very careful of which one you're on. But if I wanted to go ahead and I'm going to compress the black area, I'm going to pull that back like this and then pull this over a little bit, and that'll give me my contrast without me having to use contrast. Contrast just amplifies the dark and the light areas. And if I want to change, so 255 is a true white. If I decided to say I want true white to be here, you'll see that the entire histogram will change with that, okay? And you can push the midtone back, but I don't want it to be that. I don't want it to be like that at all. So let me just go back and do what I just did before. Let's just put it back. I do want to change a little bit of it about right here, okay? And then I will leave those midtones. So let's go before and after. You can see this is what we started with. This is what we got right now. We got a pretty decent expose, and it still keeps the emotion of the tonality of the photo. I'm going to add in some more vignetting. Now, there are certain modules that are always added to the base layer. Capture One can have layers up to 16 layers. There are some parameters that no matter where you add them from, they're going to always be at the base layer. Grain is one of those ones, and there's a few more of them. So I'm going to go ahead and put vignetting on this. I'm going to give it some vignetting, which is going to darken the edges about a half a stop and really put your eye on her. And then I'm going to go to the luminosity curve, right? And I'm going to say, we want to go in this area here. And I'm looking at the areas that I want to be able to not have it change. And so I'm going to lift that up right here, just a tad like this. And if I go in 100%, you'll see now we can see all of those areas that we could not see before. So the dynamic range of the camera is really good. So we'll go back to that. Now that I've did these different areas, I also have the ability to go and create a layer. And I can say, okay, let's do one with the hair, because I'm really not satisfied with the hair yet. I can go here and say, let's create one on a separate layer for just the hair. You'll see that it just selected the hair. And then I can go into the dynamic range and just pull up the black for the hair. Right? And now if I go back into this, I'm able to see a little bit more hair. We don't have that issue. And then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the base layer. If I wanted to do something with the garment, if I felt, well, you know what, it needs to be more of a bone white, there's a way of doing that as well. I could actually just go back in here and say, let's go under people. I want to just get her clothes and put it on a separate. And if we hit that, you can see what it's doing. Now, some of that's got her leg in there. You have to make sure you examine it, because when it puts the leg in there, then you have to right click, and it doesn't use the brackets of the same thing you use for Photoshop. So you do that. And then I can just take this off of her leg, right? Okay. Because you don't want it on the leg. Okay. And then I could go in here, and there's some on her skin up here as well. Right. So you have to be careful. But if I wanted to do that, I could now go on the color, go to the color editor, go ahead and take that off, and just hold this down and hold down my shift. And if I pull that down, that will change that to a more bone white color, right? Because it's stripping the color off of it. And then if I want to change the luminosity of that, which is the lightness, I would hold my Option key or Alt and pull it up, and it could be lighter or darker. Then what we're going to do is go back to the adjustment, and I'm going to go back to the base layer. I'm going to pull it in the opposite direction to kind of flatten it out. And then I'm going to grab the exposure and pull the exposure down. And it's going to pull everything down equally, about a half a stop. That's the look that I want for that photo. It's going to keep the emotions of the actual, theme of the photo. If I want to be able to bring a little bit more light to her, I can do that. How can I do that? We'll just go back into here, and I'm going to say, let's get face and body skin. And we're going to go ahead and create one for that. And I'm going to hit this. I'll see that it's got it. And all I have to do at that particular time is say, let's bring up a little shadows. And I don't want to do brightness, because brightness will brighten it up too much, right? So we'll just, and now lift a little darkness in the skin right there. Then you got to go in 100% to take a look at it. Now you can see what it's doing over here. So you don't want to do the shadows, either one or the other. The black is causing more of the problem. We're going to go here. Now, if I want to take any redness that's in the skin, that's a problem. We're going to stay on the same layer. I'm going to go under here, and I'm going to go to color. They're going to have one under the color editor called skin tone. I'm going to select the skin tone that I want everything to be. I like the skin tone that's right here. So you can see what that select. If I hit this right here, everything else that's not on that skin tone will be in black and white. The reason why you want to mask the skin, because if I just change that color, it would change her skin, but plus everything else that's on that skin color. So we're going to take that off. And now that I just got it just on her skin, I'm going to go in 100%, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to change we're going to go ahead and use the uniformity to change everything to that color. I can play with the lightness of the skin and do a whole lot of difference. We don't want to take too much highlight off of the skin. We'll do that. I can actually go lighter or darker. We're going to leave the lightness just like it is. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit to take a little bit of that redness off. And I'm going to saturate the uniformity of that. And I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. And I'm going to pull that hue. And so now that skin tone is matching all over. And when I go back, I'm good to go with that. We'll take that off. I'll go back into here and take that mask off. And now we have done everything that we needed to do. If I needed to create some color harmonies in the shadows, I would have went to here and selected this and went into the shadows and made it, if I wanted the shadows to be cooler, I could go in here and pull this down and make the shadows cooler, but that's going to affect any of the dark areas. So you have to be very careful how you do this, right? It just depends on, you see how that changed that to different colors, right? Because again, we're dealing with the RGB. I like what we got here. Now what I'm going to do is for the midtones, I'm going to pull them towards the bluish to kind of cool off the photo just a tad, a little bit. And I'm going to go in the highlights and go in the opposite direction. But I'm going to pull that towards the blue as well, because the white's going to be on that. And then I'll go in the shadows and I'll just warm the shadows up a little bit more right here. And then I'll go here and just pull that down like this. And if we go before and after, this is before, this is after, before, after. Now I'm going to right click. I'm going to take this thing into Photoshop, and I'm going to use some third-party products with some presets that I've created for myself to help me actually be able to finish this up really quickly. And now we're here inside of Photoshop. Now we're going to do some things. Again, I'm going to use some of the third-party products, and this is why I recommend that you do that. It really speeds up your edits and allow you to be consistent with it. We're going to go into here. I want to be able to use heal, mattify, dodge and burn. We're going to get rid of some dark creases. We're going to use portrait volume. Her eyes are closed. We don't need to do anything with that. We're going to do a skin mask. And she's got stray hairs. So we're going to go ahead and take care of this gray hair. These are AI tools that are running locally on my device. I can run them in the cloud if I want to, but they're running locally on the device. Let's go ahead and run this. So now those parameters have been corrected. We can go in here and see everything that it put in here for me. If I go ahead and expand to this, it made sure that all these things were just applied on the skin. If I go in at 100%, we're going to, because you need to go in closely to see what the results are. So we go into here. We're going to go to stray hairs first and see what it did. You can see there was a lot of stray hairs that was able to remove that for me. It did a very good job. Heal, there was some marks on the skin. We got rid of that. Any hot spots? I don't see any hot spots that was there because I underexposed it, but I'm going to leave it there. Dodge and burn took off any like dark creases in the face. And then this right here gave what we call contouring. You can see up under the neck how to actually contour and show the jawbone structure. How it actually helps that with the skin as well. So everything that was done with this is perfect. And when I want to apply it to another photo, I can just use those same parameters that I have set, and I can get a consistent look for each photo. So that's why it's very important to invest into your darkroom. Now, what I want to do is I want to expand this wall out some more. This is something that you can't do in Capture One. Now, Lightroom's got some ability to do some expanding using some AI generative tools, but there's a limit. It depends on how big it depends on what megapixels your file are. If I just go ahead and go in here, and if I click on this right here for the crop, and I expand this out, and let's say I tell it to just do the generative fill, right? And expand this out like this. It'll do it, but it's not going to look consistent because it's too big, right? I'm doing too big of an area. There's a megapixel restriction of how well that they can actually do that. Now, I'll go into that. But I know when I go in 100%, you say, well, that looks pretty good. When I go in 100% and we start examining that, this did not do a bad job. You can see that it's breaking up, though. You see how the wall is kind of sharp here. That should be sharp as well. You see how that's just smeared, right? Because it's beyond the megapixels. It's got the right texture and everything, but it just doesn't look right. So what I would do is we would undo that, and I'm going to show you, this is why third-party tools come in handy. So what I need to do is, when I want to expand this, I'm going to say where it says delete crop pixels. We're going to take that off. I want it to be transparent. I'm going to go under here, and we're going to go ahead and expand this again. About right here. I'm going to have it be transparent. Then I'm going to go into this tool by Pix Imperfect, and I'm going to make sure I'm using the Pix Hack. I can use Firefly 3 or Firefly 1, but I'm going to do Pix Hack. It's going to do it at 1,000 pixels at a time, and then I'm going to tell it to do the transparency. Now, I want you to note this. 80% of the time it gets it right. Sometimes it will just create something in that space that just doesn't exist. And that is the nature of using generative AI. We're going to go ahead and click this. And it's going to do this at 1,000 pixels at a time. So because it's doing it at 1,000 pixels at a time, the realism is going to be a little bit better than if I just did the entire strip, right? So it's going across, it's seeing what it's doing. Sometimes it just don't get it right. We'll see. And it's just creating it. And when it finishes, we'll take a look at it. It blends in a whole lot better than to have that smearing. Now, if you're going to put this on Instagram, you can get away with it. If that's the only place you're going to post it, because Instagram is so small anyway, you're not going to see the results. But if you're going to put this, or if you're going to print it, you want to make sure that you get as much detail as possible. And it's going to go ahead and do that. And that's been done, with no problem. Now we'll go into this 100%. And we'll look at that, and you can see that detail matches. It's not smearing. It looks just like the wall. And that's what you want to pay attention to when you're doing these kind of things like that. So that actually works in really good. We're going to flatten this photo. And then I'm going to take this tool here. And I'm going to make sure I got my remove tool. And we're going to fill in some of these gaps where it's going to be using content aware. We'll fill that in. It'll blend it in really well. And that works really good. So now we got that photo like we want to. I'm going to go ahead and copy to make another copy. We're going to go into Liquify, which was back in the early days, we used to call this digital liposuction. So we're going to go into this, and I just want to bring this in just a little bit. You have to be very careful of how you adjust these things here. And we want to bring in a little bit of this arm right here. Just a little bit of it. We're going to go back in here and pull this back like that. And the rest of that can stay. Sometimes I like to correct this as well so we don't have that change. And we're good to go with that. So those things have been corrected. And now that we got that, we're going to go in here 100%. Everything looks good. No issues. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load up another plugin here. And I am going to use my own presets for this. So I'm going to hit open. And what we're going to do in here is I'm going to just grab one of my own presets to sped up the time with this. And we're going to go with the brilliance and contrast. That's going to give me the contrast look that I want for this photo. And it's something that I've created. I've been using this for almost 8 years. It just works. And I don't have to do anything with it. We're going to just hit apply. That works there. Now that sky is fine, but I have the ability to change the sky if I want to. So I'm going to go under Luminar, because Luminar, I have several different programs that can change the sky, but we're going to go under Luminar, and we're going to find a sky to change, and then that's going to be it. And I may even add some fog to it as well, to add some mist on the ground. So let's go in here. I'm going to go into the Enhance tool, which is the best tool inside of Luminar. Pull this up. Now you can see that it's saturating it. I don't want this saturated. So if I use that Enhance tool to bring out details, I have to also go into Develop and tell it not to saturate. I don't want this saturated whatsoever. We're going to desaturate it. I want to bring up the vibrance that'll pump up the muted colors, but not the skin tones. So we have to keep that off of there. And then I'm going to go back here and go to Sky. And we're going to replace the sky really cool here. So let me just choose one. I want to go. I'm not going to take too long to find the sky. We're going to find one that works. One of these skies is going to work. I'm just looking at ones that I got here. Making it blend in it. That one's going to work. And I'll show you how we actually blend it in. So I go in here. I can flip that sky. Let's keep it where it is. The mask has been refined. We got some hard, halos around it. So we want to close those gaps up. So as you can see, we can close the gaps and fix it around that. We can go globally and pull that over. So let's go ahead and fix those gaps as much as we can. So we don't have those hard halos there. And then I'm going to go into, we can refine the lighting, refine the light strength. So if I pull it all away, you'll see that it's going to affect the photo. Let's give it some more strength because I want that sky. If I leave it like this, it looks like the sky and the rest of the scene doesn't work. But so we're going to pull that strength so it does that. We can relight the human as well, right? So it relights the person, so that blends in really well with that. And then I'm going to go under here, and we're going to defocus the sky just a little bit because we got a little bokeh going on in the back. We're going to use atmospheric type of conditions to light that up. I can brighten up the sky a little bit more. If I want it to be cool, I can cool it off, or I can actually warm it. Let's cool it off a little bit more. And we're going to use that. I'm going to defocus the sky a little bit more from there. We got the brightness going. We're going to use a little bit more atmospheric right there. And that is the look that we're going to have for that photo. And then I'm going to go down and go into what we call landscape area. Now I can change the grass, but we won't do that. We're going to go into atmosphere. And in here, we're going to add some fog. So when I add the fog, you'll see that it's putting it there. And now I can play with the depth of where I want the fog to be added. But we're going to go more with mist, right? We can go with mist, or I can go with haze, right? And haze is just keep it on the ground more so, and we can do that. That's the look we want to have for that photo. I'm going to go ahead and take that back. And you can see the skin and everything has been taken care of. We're good to go with this. There's nothing else to do to the photo. We're going to flatten this photo. And we're going to quit. And it's going to say, it's going to save it and take it back into Capture One. And there go that photo there. So you can look at what we got here. Everything is good. This is what we sent over. This is what we brought back. We sent this over, we brought this back. This is the original RAW file right here. So that's the original RAW file. That was the DNG file that we actually did our editing on. If we go before and after, you can see that's how the file looked. And if we go in 100%, you can see all of the hair on the face. We sent that to Photoshop. We'll take that back off. And this is what we brought back. And you can continue to do edits here because the photo's not done until you're done. So I can go in here now and go clarity, pull up some clarity to punch at the midtones. I can still use this retouch because it'll see it. So I can now go in here and use a little bit of this retouch just for the face since I've got the body done. And I can go in here and say, let's go around the neck, and we can just go here and just soften the skin up as much as we want to. Add more contouring around there, right? And we can say the teeth are showing a little bit. We can go ahead and do that. And we can just use this right here. And we can do this part, and this is done, right? Now I can print this photo off without any issues. The photo's complete. Remember, this is a RAW editor. It allows you to process your RAW. When you need to go beyond that, you have to take it to something like Photoshop or a third-party product to be able to get a little bit more out of that photo. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you got any questions, send me an email. Thanks for watching.